Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Dear third year students, evening study, welcome to your first lecture of the course entitled Pedagogy and Curriculum Innovations. In this course, we are going to study different teaching methods and the techniques that we use to teach English language in language classes. Today's lecture is going to be devoted to speak about first, the definitions of the basic terms that we need them in the course, and then we will move on to speak about the grammar translation method. So, first, let's start with the key terms that we need them while we teach and study the course. The first term that we need to know about is approach. An approach refers to the general assumptions about what language is and about how learning a language occurs. Of course, this is according to Richards and Rogers, 1986. So it refers to the general assumptions about language and how the learning of language occurs. So, for example, we have different theories about language, so we need to know about them. The approach gives us the assumptions of these about the language, and of course it also gives us the ways through which the learning of language occurs. The approach represents the sum of our philosophy about both the theory of language and the theory of learning. So it includes the accumulation of the philosophy about the theory of language and the philosophy about the theory of learning in general. In other words, an approach to language teaching describes. So here we are going to concentrate about the approach to language teaching. So this approach to language teaching describes first the nature of the language, and then how knowledge of a language is acquired, and the conditions that promote language acquisition. So these are the three basic things that the approach to language teaching describes. First, it describes the nature of language, and then how our knowledge about the language is acquired. So whether we are first language learners or we are second language learners, so there are assumptions about the knowledge of how language is acquired, whether it is your first language or your second language. And of course, it also helps us to know or give us the assumptions about the conditions that are used to promote language acquisition. So this is all about approach. The second term that we need to know about is method. A method is a practical implementation of an approach. So it is what? It is the practical implementation, application of the approach. So now we take the basic ideas from the approach, and the method is used to implement these ideas. So a theory is put into practice at the level of a method. So the theory, which is represented by the approach, is going to be put into practice, is going to be put into application at the level of a method. The method includes decisions about what? About the particular skills to be taught. So what skills that we need to teach. Okay, so for example, for a certain purpose, we need to teach the skill of speaking. For another purpose, we need to teach the skill of listening, writing, reading, or maybe we what integrate all four skills at the same time. So the method gives us the decision what particular skills to be taught. The other thing, the roles of the teacher and the learner in language teaching and learning. So the method prescribes the role of the teacher. What is the role of the teacher? The teacher could be the authority of the class. The teacher could be a facilitator. The teacher could be observer. And what is the role of the learner also? It gives us the specifications about the role of both the teacher and the learner. The other thing that the method help us to take a decision about is the appropriate procedures and techniques. What are the procedures that we should follow when we teach language, and what are the best techniques that are used to teach the language? The other thing that the method help us to take a decision about is the content to be taught. What is the content that we should teach? Should we, teach? For example, should we teach real life situations? Should we teach literature and the like? And the order in which the content will be presented. Of course, it is very important to put the content that we are going to teach for the students in order. Now, what is the order of the content of the course that we are going to teach? Are we going to start from the easy to the most difficult, or are we going to start from the most important to the less important, or vice versa? So it helps us to take such decisions. So the method also involves a specific syllabus organization, choices of the materials that will boost learning, and the means to assess learners and evaluate teaching and learning. It is a sort of an organization plan that relies on the philosophical premises of an approach. So the method takes its basic ideas from the approach. It implements the premises of the approach and put them into practice. So it helps us to take such decisions: how to organize our syllabus, what material that we should choose, and what things that help us to boost the learning process. Okay, so all these things are included in the method. The third term that we need to know about is procedures. According to Jeremy Harmer, he describes the procedures as an ordered set of techniques. So procedures are the set of techniques that are put into order. They are the step-by-step measures to execute a method. So they represent the steps that we use them to execute a method, to implement the method. A common procedure in the grammar translation method, the method that we are going to know something about today, for example, is to start by explaining the grammar rules and exemplifying these rules through sentences that the students then had to translate into their mother tongue. So this is the procedure. So it represents what? The step-by-step measures that we use them to execute, to implement the method. So the procedure, for example, was giving the explaining the grammar rules for the students. The procedure is to exemplify these rules, to give what examples about these rules. The procedure is to translate from one language to into another. So a procedure is smaller than a method and larger than a technique. So the procedure is in something in between the method and the technique. It is larger than a technique, but it is smaller than a method. The other term that we need to know about is the technique. Technique is the implementation of a procedure. Implementing a procedure necessitates certain practices and behaviors that operate in teaching a language according to a particular method. So when we want to put the procedure into practice, into application, we need certain practices. These practices are the techniques that we should follow. These practices and behaviors are the techniques that every procedure relies on. So the procedure relies on certain techniques. They are the actual moment-to-moment classroom steps that lead to a specified outcome. So they are these steps that we should follow to reach at a specific outcome. So for example, to have the student translate, to have the student communicate in English language. They could take the form of an exercise or just an activity that you have to do to complete the task. So they are of different shapes, they are of different kinds. Some of them take the form of exercises. So the students have to solve these exercises, have to practice doing these exercises. So this is if they come as practices, or they can be activities. They can be activities that the students need to practice, need to complete, to complete certain tasks. For instance, when using videos, teachers often use a technique called silent viewing, which consists of playing the video without sound and asking students to figure out what the characters were saying. So this is a kind of technique that might be used, that the teachers might use to reach at a certain aim. Now look at this figure. This figure, this diagram represents the terms that we have already spoken about. The top of the figure, you have the approach. The approach, it represents the theoretical bases that we set to describe our understanding, our knowledge about language and the learning process. And then under the procedure, we have the method. The method takes the ideas from the approach and puts them into application. Each method needs certain procedures, more than one procedures. These procedures, represent the application of the method. And under each procedure, we have certain sets of practices, which are the techniques that help us to reach our major aim of language teaching. So, in conclusion, according to this framework that we have just described, An approach informs methods with both the theory of language and the theory of learning. So the approach informs the method, the theory of language and the theory of learning. The methods are the actual implementations of approaches. They are theories put into practice. And procedures, in turn, are informed by methods. They are ordered step-by-step events that have specified outcomes. Procedures rely on techniques to achieve desired results. Now, after we have explained these different terms that each teaching method needs to refer to them, now it's time to move to talk about the first teaching method, and which is the oldest the oldest non-teaching method, which is the grammar translation method. The GTM, or the grammar translation method of foreign language teaching, is one of the most traditional methods, dating back to the late 19th and early 20th centuries. It was originally used to teach dead languages and literatures such as Latin and Greek, involving little or no spoken communication or listening. So the major aim of the grammar translation method was previously to teach something about the literature of dead languages. By dead languages, we mean the languages that are no longer spoken. However, we have their literature written. So these languages, like Latin and Greek, they were taught by means of using the grammar translation method. Okay, because the written history of these languages refers to religion and things that are related to science. Most sacred books like the Bible, the Old Testament and the New Testament were first written in these languages, and people usually need to know these languages to know the religion from its source languages. Okay, or maybe they want to know about the science of the that the Greeks have set earlier. Okay. Now, the goal of the grammar translation method. According to the grammar translation method, the goal of foreign language study is to learn a language in order to read its literature, in order to benefit from the mental discipline and intellectual development that result from foreign language study. So for them, this is the major aim of learning a foreign language. It is to study the literature of that language, to know something about the literature of the language, the way the people lived earlier, and of course this will help us to raise up their mental abilities and their intellectual development. Now let's move on to speak about the principles of the grammar translation method. For your record, every teaching method should have certain principles. Now, what are the principles of the grammar translation method? They believe, the advocates of the grammar translation method believe that literary language is superior to spoken language. So they believe that, the written literature of the language is superior to the language that is spoken by people in their everyday life. Okay, The other thing about the role of the teacher inside the classroom. For the grammar translation method, they believe that the authority in the classroom is the teacher. So the teacher is number one in the teaching process, in the teaching and learning process in general. Okay, for the grammar translation method, the primary skills to be improved are reading and writing. So they concentrate on these two skills, reading and writing. Okay. The grammar translation method also focuses on accuracy, not fluency. They want people to what? To say things in accurate way, to read things in accurate way, but it doesn't matter whether they said them fluently or not. So it is accuracy that is being focused upon. And the students are taught to translate. This is a principle. Students learn the language to translate also. So when they know how to translate, they know something about the literature of that language. Now the interaction inside the classroom here is always directed from the teacher towards the students. So there is no one-to-one interaction. The teacher always say things and order student to do things. So it is the interaction is one-way interaction. It is directed from the teacher to the students. Now, when the students commit certain errors or make certain errors, the teacher correct them at the spot. So immediately, the teacher stops the students and he said, no, this is wrong. You have to say it this way. Okay, so errors are corrected at the spot. Now, the student's native language is the language mostly used in the classroom. So the native language. So for example, if we choose to teach English, in our case, in our situation, so it's okay to use Arabic to teach English. This is of course according to the grammar translation method. So it is the native language is the dominant language inside the classroom, and very little teaching is done in the target language. The ability to communicate in the target language is not a goal of language instruction. So when we instruct our students throughout the use of the grammar translation method, we don't aim at developing their ability to communicate in the target language. Our major aim here is to help them to read and translate from the target language into the native language. Learning is facilitated through attention to similarities between the target language and the native language. So they believe that we can facilitate the learning process by drawing the students' attention into the similarities that hold between the two languages, between the native language and the the target language. So we say now these are the similar things between the two languages. So they say that when they know the similarities between these two languages, this will help them to learn faster. It is important for students to learn about grammar or form of the target language. So it is a very basic principle that the student should learn about the grammar and structure of the language they are studying. Deductive application of an explicit grammar rule is a useful pedagogical technique. So they believe that now we give the student the rule and we ask them to give examples about the grammar. So we give them grammar rules, and then the student will generate their own examples following the rules we are giving them. Language learning provides good mental exercise. They believe that it is, the learning process is all the whole, it is what a mental exercise that will help sharpen the students' mental abilities. Students should be conscious of the grammar rules of the target language. Again, the grammar is emphasized. They should know about the rules of grammar. Now, what are the techniques that we use in the grammar translation method to help our students learn the language? Of course, the first thing is memorization of words, grammar rules, and vocabulary. The students are given lists of words and their meanings in the native language, and they are asked to memorize these words. Students are given grammar rules, and they are asked to memorize these grammar rules and generate their own examples according to these rules. What other techniques? Readings in the target language are translated directly. So the students are given reading passages, of course, from the literature of that language, and they are asked to translate them directly. What other techniques? Comparisons of the two languages. They use the techniques of comparing the two languages. What similar things are there between the native language and the target language? Of course, the grammar is taught deductively. Grammar rules are presented with examples. What other techniques? Reading comprehension questions. When the students are introduced to a reading passage, an excerpt of literature, then they will be asked comprehension questions. They will ask them what they comprehend about this reading passage. Antonyms and synonyms. Of course, the students are given list of antonyms and synonyms. The words in their similar meaning and their opposite meaning. So they believe in this way, when they memorize these lists of synonyms and antonyms, they will increase their linguistic repertoire. What other techniques? We have the fill in the blanks. So the students are giving sentences with with gaps, and they are asked to fill in these gaps. And they are given words, and they are asked to put these words in sentences. In the other technique, they are asked to write compositions. Now, of course, this teaching method has been criticized greatly. However, the same persons who criticize this teaching method, they say that it may have certain merits. There are certain good points about the grammar translation method. What are these good points? Grammar of the target language is mastered. Since they are introduced to the grammar and rules of grammar, the students who study the language according to the grammar translation method will be able to master the language. And they also will be able to master the translation skills. The reading abilities and writing abilities of the students are well trained because they concentrate on the two skills of reading and writing. It makes a few demands on teachers. It saves the teacher labor. So it is very helpful to the teacher. It is, we can say it is teacher friendly because what? the teacher does not have to, exert so much effort while teaching. It saves his labor. It helps also in building vocabulary since they are given lists of words to memorize them. Of course, this means that it's going to help them to increase their vocabulary repertoire. Comprehension and grammar are easily taught and tested. The reading comprehension questions and the grammar questions are very easily taught. Just very, the techniques that are used to teach these things are very easy. And of course, the test, the assessment, the evaluation of comprehension and grammar, are very easy and very helpful. A translation is also tested, very easily. Least stressful for students, so they use their native language. So it is not stressful for a student because the student does not have to use the target language. They can use their native language. Okay, so it is not stressful for the students. Shy students will not feel stressed. Low level students will not feel stressed because whenever they feel they are trapped, they can use their native language because the grammar translation method is less sensitive to the use of the native language. Now let's come to the demerits of the grammar translation method, the bad things about the grammar translation method. First, it is a unnatural method. This grammar translation method is unnatural method because it does not follow the natural order of learning. The natural order of learning is listening, speaking, reading, and writing. This method skipped two things, skipped listening and speaking because it concentrates on reading and writing only. So it neglected two important skills, which are listening and speaking. That's why they say it is unnatural method, because the natural way of learning the language starts with listening and then speaking, then reading, and finally writing. So it skipped these two important things. Translation is an advanced skill, so the method cannot be used in the early stages of learning. It cannot be used in the early stages of learning. It is an advanced skill. So, as a fresh student will not be able to translate because translation requires a person who masters two languages, who has a good mastery over two languages. So this grammar translation method can never be used as a teaching method in the early stages of learning. Social contextual exposure is essentially eliminated because teaching is done in the native language. So there is no exposure at all. The social exposure is totally eliminated in this language because what? Because it concentrates on reading and writing while speaking and listening are neglected. The listening and speaking skills are excluded, are neglected. Lack of motivation and feeling of boredom. The students are not going to be motivated, and they are neither teacher motivated nor self motivated because what? Because they need just to memorize things and lists of words and phrases, and that's it. This will make them feel bored. This will make them feel bored. That's all for today, and I hope that you get benefit from the lecture. If you have any question, you may post your questions on the Google Classroom platform.